Welcome back to the shop, guys. I recently just started making some changes to the LS2 powered C6 Corvette, and I've already came across the easiest 22 horsepower I think I ever have. And the best part is I've only had to spend about 120 bucks or so, and I haven't even had to turn a wrench yet. And that's horsepower that you can feel. If that sounds too good to be true, I promise you it is true, and we're gonna dig into exactly how I did it next.
Toys for life.
As many of you know, I've spent quite a bit of time this past month working on part throttle tuning for the C6, and just recently I started on the fun stuff, wide open throttle tuning. I must say, when I scanned the first wide open throttle C6 pull with HP tuners, I was pretty disappointed. Even though the C6's LS2 engine was running on 91 octane pump gas, air temperatures were pretty cool at 73 degrees. The coolant temperature was reasonable at about 200 degrees. I had 5 degrees of knock retard in first gear and about 3 degrees of knock retard in second gear. Now, if you're not familiar with knock retard, it is the number of degrees of ignition timing advance that the C6's computer is pulling in an effort to stop harmful knock or ping from continuing to happen. All LS engines come with knock sensors, and their job is to listen for knock or ping. In fact, they're so good at it, they can hear it starting to happen much quicker than your ears ever could. And from that information, the car's computer reduces ignition timing advance, which is usually very effective at stopping the knock. Anyways, 5 degrees of ignition timing advance reduction at 4,000 RPMs, wide open throttle, takes our timing advance number from the 23 degrees that GM's engineers determined was ideal for maximum horsepower under those conditions, down to 18 degrees because of the computer's counter-offensive measures to reduce knock. Once the C6's computer does take away that ignition timing advance, it does slowly give it back, but by the time we're at 6,000 RPMs, we're still at 4.5 degrees of reduced ignition timing advance, and according to HP Tuner software, that's costing us somewhere around 40 horsepower. More on that in just a little bit. The thing about knock is, once it starts to happen, the computer has to take quite a bit of ignition timing advance away, known as knock retard, versus if we just change the tune a little bit by taking, say, half of that amount from the base tune, knock wouldn't start in the first place, the computer wouldn't have to pull any, and we'd have more horsepower. So I hopped in the C6, broke out HP tuners, and I did 8 rounds of scanning where I went for a test drive, analyzed the scan, and then from the tune I reduced ignition timing from the area the scan was showing was problematic with knock retard. We repeated that over 8 times, and I still had some knock. That is a lot of ignition timing advance reduction. So I started wondering why my stock LS2 was experiencing so much knock and the subsequent knock retard and material power reduction that goes along with it. Could it be that since the mighty LS2 engine has the highest compression ratio of all of the LS engines, coming in at a whopping 10.9 to 1 compression ratio, and since this example has a little over 100,000 miles on it, maybe it's got a tiny bit of carbon buildup on the tops of the pistons, which is completely normal, and perhaps that carbon is occupying just enough space to bump that compression ratio up to 11 to 1, or perhaps even higher. If so, then by running that much compression on 91 octane pump gas, even with a stock tune, expecting to experience little or no knock would be an awful lot to ask. Or could it be that one of my fuel injectors is a teeny bit plugged, which could lead to a lean condition in one or even more of my cylinders, which could easily lead to excessive knock? It could be either one of those things, or perhaps even both, but one thing's for sure, 91 octane pump gas wasn't cutting it in my high compression LS2 engine, so out it went, and in went BP's finest 93 octane premium. So of course now I'm super excited. I've got BP's 93 octane rocket fuel in the C6, and I proceeded to run several wide open throttle tests, and it was a lot better, but still not good enough. Here, take a look. This is a pole with 91 octane, and you can see we got a little hit of knock here, another hit here of almost 5 degrees, then a massive hit here of 8 degrees. The computer does its best to pull out this timing, but look, we're all the way down to 15.5 degrees. Temperatures under 200 degrees coolant, 73 degrees intake air temperatures. It starts giving the timing back. That's that red sloping line here. And then boom, once again, at about 6,000 RPM, it pulls another 7 degrees. It's pulling 7 degrees. So that's a huge hit on timing. And the estimated horsepower at 6,000 RPMs is 345 horsepower. And if we shift to 93 octane, you can see we're still getting a little bit of knock here. We got 3 degrees there. Temperatures are a little higher, 81 degrees, still not outrageous. It's given the timing back, I shift. Everything looks pretty good going into second gear. We got about 20 degrees of timing. And then boom, we get hit with another 2.2 degrees of timing. And at 6,000 RPMs, 377 horsepower. So that's a gain of almost 30 horsepower going from crappy 91 octane in this high compression LS2 jumping to 93 octane. But you can see with the factory timing levels, we're still getting plenty of knock. So 93 octane is not good enough for this engine at our elevation. We're about 1,000 degrees above sea level. This might be different if you were in the mountains, 5,000 or 6,000 feet. It might be plenty good, but we can do better than this. In addition to my own data that I've collected that indicates that the LS2 is asking for, actually yelling for more octane, while I was pondering the possibility that carbon buildup on my pistons or a partially plugged fuel injector was exacerbating my LS2's knock retard issue, an individual on CorvetteForum.com replied to one of my posts. His name is Gemstater, and it led me to an article that was posted back in 2005 on the Corvette Action Center that talks in detail about the octane requirements of the then new LS2 engines being at least 93 and maybe even 95 octane. And that has confirmed to my satisfaction that there's nothing wrong with my LS2 engine. Turns out there's quite a few LS2 guys out there that subscribe to the theory, including me, that the LS2's relatively high 10.9 compression ratio, the fact that it left the factory with a pretty aggressive tune from GM, and if you live in areas with low elevation such as mine, which is 950 feet or so above sea level, that's on the ragged edge of what 91 octane or even 93 octane pumped gas can support. And as it turns out, under these conditions, the LS2 just really needs 95 octane to produce maximum horsepower. I'll be sure to leave a link to the article from Corvette Action Center about the C6's LS2 in the description below in case you want to read it in its entirety. Oh, and one more tidbit along these lines. After GM was done with the relatively high 10.9 compression ratio LS2 and they developed the mighty LS3, well, they dropped the compression ratio back down to 10.7 to 1, and there's only one good reason I can think of that they would have done that. Alright, so that's all well and good, but how in the heck do you get 95 octane pump gas? Well, you can go a couple of routes. You can use Boostane or Torco additives to bump up, say, 93 to 95 octane, or depending on where you live, if E85 is readily available in your area, you can easily custom blend it to get 95 octane fuel, and that's exactly what I did. We also have to make a quick change to the tune. We have to change the stoichiometric ratio for what we had for E8 fuel, and now we're at E30, so we'll change this to 12.95. Once I added the 85, I drove it under part throttle conditions for about 15 minutes to make sure the additional ethanol was blended properly between the C6's two fuel tanks. And then I tested the fuel directly from the rail to double check my work. Here's our scan with 95 octane. As you can see, it's pretty clean. Air temperatures start out about 81 degrees, 200 degree coolant temp. We still have a couple of little blips of knock, 1 degree, which is not a big deal. And as we get towards the higher RPMs, we're still only at 83% duty cycle, no big deal there. And the peak horsepower number is 398 horsepower at 5,960 RPMs. That's about 50 more horsepower than we made on this pole here with 91 octane. And that's another 21 horsepower over what we made with 93 octane. Guys, here's where 95 octane really shines. Check this out. We have 99-degree inlet air temps today because it's super hot out. I took this for a spin, 95 octane, no knock anywhere. And look at this, we still managed to get about 382 horsepower at 5,900 RPMs, and it was still able to tolerate 22.5 degrees of ignition advance. Try this with 93 or 91 octane, not happening. So what are the key takeaways from today's video? Well, if you have a C6 or a C5 Corvette and you care about its performance, you owe it to yourself to have it scanned by somebody with HP Tuner scanner so you can see exactly how it's really running at wide open throttle. If you happen to live within driving distance of the Twin Cities Metro here in Minnesota, hit me up at the email below if you want to arrange for a time for the two of us to evaluate your Corvette. Takeaway number 2, if you happen to own an LS2 powered C6 Corvette, locate and run the highest octane pump gas you can find in your area. Again, here in Minnesota, that would be 93 octane. Takeaway number 3, if you're going on a long road trip and you're gonna just be cruising at part throttle and you can look me in the eye and say, "Toys for life, I won't go to wide open throttle," then you can absolutely get away with 91 octane in your LS2 powered C6, or you can get away with 87 or 89 octane in your LS1 powered C5, or probably 89 octane if it's got the LS6. That's my opinion, and everybody's got one. Takeaway number 4, if you happen to live in a city with a higher elevation like Flagstaff, Arizona, Denver, Colorado, you won't need the same level of octane as I do here in Minnesota, where I'm at about 950 feet above sea level, so keep that in mind. That's a wrap, guys. You made it to the end. Give yourself a thumbs up for doing that. Leave a comment so we've got something to talk about below, but most of all, thanks for watching.